Hey everybody, Jay Barrino here. I am joined again by Subsourian.
Hello again, Jay.
Hello
So,
again, indeed. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and explain the conundrum?
so we usually record these like around Wednesday, Thursday, and we do the mutation, and then we do like the record for over 2 weeks. But we recorded an entire thing of like our voiceover, and at the end, Jay realized he was muted, so it would have just been my voice.
Yep,
So we're doing it again.
it was about 45 minutes, and I'm definitely not muted this time. I'm very embarrassed about that. The reason I was muted, just to kind of go over how we're doing the format of this, is in the background of this was our playthrough of the Weekly Mutation 2 weeks ago, and then this is just a previous recording. And then after this, I will go ahead and have the playthrough of this week's Weekly Mutation, and then we'll just sit on the StarCraft co-op screen as usual. But that's why I was muted, because I was muted while we were recording the actual gameplay. But in any case, we're here. Topics for the week: we're going to talk about we're going to revisit the Mass Effect Legendary Edition because they released a lot of details for that. We're going to talk about the Blizzard 30th Anniversary bundle, and then we're going to talk about the classic team Dissolution at Blizzard.
Yes. So, all right,
So,
yeah, and
I guess to get started with Mass Effect, I remember you really originally wanted to bring this up. We talked about this all already, so it's going to be a little weird, I
yeah.
guess.
I mean, yeah, but I think we've also looked over it a bit, so we can also go over some of the stuff I didn't know going in. Because initially, I actually came in because I was going to complain having seen the trailer, where I'm like, this just looks like a graphics pack to the game. It didn't look like they added much for $60. And literally, as I was talking and looking through the list you gave me, I'm like, oh, they actually added like a pretty substantial amount. Like, and this isn't too bad. For those who don't know, they're remastering the first 3 games and putting it in a bundle. The biggest thing, of course, is the graphics are a lot more cohesive. The customization options transfer better between games, which was a big thing because your character in 1 transferred to 2 and 3 would not always look great. You'd have to tinker with it a bit because, yeah, it didn't really look as good. And most importantly, they took out the Miranda butt scene.
Yeah, so the thing with that is like I don't care. Like I just to be honest, like I'm not someone who's like how dare they take that out. And at the same time like it's not that I was there like, yeah, you better take that out. This upsets me, but it's more like when I did see it like back in the original game, it's just sort of I just cringed a little bit. I was just like, really? Like this is embarrassing. Come on.
I kind of see the point of like I want everything warts and all. And sometimes you can't avoid it. Like a big thing in CNC Remastered was back in the day they used like Apache and like a bunch of copyrighted helicopter names. And the remaster did a thing where like, well, we can't put those in, but we're just gonna make them generic helicopter. But also here's this mod community made that adds all old names back. That's no related to us.
Yeah. That we're not liable for.
Yeah. So I'm sure something like that will come up. Where you can mod it back in, but really, like you were saying, it was an egregious. It was egregious at the time, and I don't know anyone who's particularly like. I only heard groans. I never heard anyone's like, "Yeah, this is the best thing they added." I don't know.
Right, exactly. And again, to be clear, this is not me ever thinking like they need to change this. But now that they are, I'm just like, yeah, like sure, you know. So there are 2 things that really strike my fancy in general about this. Number one, well, I don't know if it strikes my fancy, but it stands out, is the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer is gone. It's not part of this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know
So they talked about the Galactic Readiness Rating, which, contrary to popular belief, which you might hear online, was never actually needed to achieve enough war assets to get like the final, best, highest war assets needed ending. But Mass Effect 3 co-op multiplayer was a banger. I loved it, and it's too bad that it's going away. But they're also making it so like so long as you're playing the game, that readiness rating just naturally goes up, and the whole multiplayer aspect of it is gone.
Yeah. Well, that's a shame, but I'm okay. I'm at least glad they're kind of they're modifying it so you can like get that. But it's still a shame because like we were mentioning, I enjoyed that. I did not think I'd enjoy that mode, and I very much did.
Exactly. Yeah, and something I brought up yesterday is I think Mass Effect 3 was released at a time when people were starting to become extremely exhausted with paid transactions in like multiplayer games and how like multiplayer was being shooed into single player games, and we're starting to see the pendulum swing back a bit on that. But it's a shame because at that time, that's how everyone was like, oh, I don't want to have to play the multiplayer. I already hate the idea of it. But as it turns out, it was really good.
Yeah. I'm hoping we see it in the new Mass Effect. Like, there's still hope with the new Mass Effect, especially, like you mentioned. I don't think it's necessarily a pendulum. I just think people have learned how to, from Dark Souls, really, how to integrate multiplayer and single player more elegantly than they had. Back in that day, there were some real stinkers when it came to that kind of integration. But
Absolutely.
I'm hoping, I am hoping that they go back on that idea with the next one. Though then again, you could argue like, well, it should devote resources to the main game. I know people who are like, well, I don't want to do multiplayer, so I don't know. Hopefully, we'll see. I hope they do something. But
it's just they were so careful with the initial Mass Effect 3 release to be like, hey, you don't have to do this. You definitely don't have to do this, and people still thought that they had to do it because they wanted to see that 100% number, even though they didn't need that 100% to get the max final whatever.
Yeah, that was my confusion, because you had mentioned you don't need it. I was like, I'm pretty sure I needed it to get 100%, but you didn't need that to get the ending. Was the big
correct?
Thing.
Yeah. But if you wanted to see the 100%, which it never stayed at 100%, it constantly went down and down to keep you playing it. So yeah, I guess from that perspective, it could be frustrating for sure.
Yeah. But and I'm sure, like, it sounds like they're keeping the core game. The big thing, of course, that we mentioned was that 1 is getting its combat revamped in some ways. It isn't entirely clear how, but I mean, really, like, and thinking back on it, 1's combat was a little clunky but fine. But the bigger problem was a lot of the bugs, in my opinion. That game had some bugs.
So my biggest issue with 1 was the difficulty scaling. Like the insanity difficulties on 2 and 3 felt like perfect to me. Like they were the perfect top end of the game, where a lot of the encounters were like you needed to really know what you were doing in order to beat them. Especially like the earlier missions in Mass Effect 2. Some of them were pretty nuts. But in 1, all it did was make all the enemies like insane bullet sponges. So I hope that is being addressed. I'm not sure. The biggest thing that I saw in terms of gameplay was that they're making it so that weapon proficiencies are not class dependent. So like any class can use any weapon, but only certain classes can level up weapons. So like you're not penalized or it's basically something along those lines where like more weapons are available to different classes.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see if they do that kind of rebound. And there's also the thing on the highest difficulty, I know, where, and I don't know how true it is because it's largely from my friends, where what class you were pretty much determined, like, if you could really do the highest difficulty. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Yep. I think I read somewhere like 90% or 95% of all players play as soldiers, which is like the default class.
I did. I didn't care for biotics that much, so I just stuck with soldier. So,
well, yeah, it's just soldier felt the most versatile. That's the thing. It's just like I played a couple different ones, but you know, of all my playthroughs, soldier just felt the cleanest and most reasonable to get through the game, as if the game was kind of designed around it.
I'm also the person that usually plays, like, in MMOs, I usually play the warrior class, like the generic dude. So that felt good. That felt good to me. So,
likewise, yeah.
Thematically. So, but yeah, so I think I mentioned it. Initially I balked at the $60 price tag, but three games in 1, all remastered, that's still pretty good. It's for the price point. We'll have to see though. It's because, I mean, I'm sure people are going to nitpick it to death and back at launch. And so you're going to know, like, all the time whether it's a deal breaker or not for you. So if you just wait and see.
So I think EA as a publisher, their remasters have been pretty solid in the sense that you know what you're getting before you buy, even before you pre-order, right? It's not like... I think that the one major remaster failure has been Warcraft 3 Reforged, without a doubt, because that was one where, like, we weren't really sure what we were getting until after it happened, but they were accepting pre-orders a year before. In the case of Mass Effect Legendary Edition, they have made a pretty clear list of what to expect, to the point where I know that even if there's some unexpected stuff, what they've listed, what it's going to be, is acceptable to me. And I know, like, I love Mass Effect, and also something I mentioned yesterday, is how remasters are... The target audience for remasters are people like you and I at an age where we grew up with these games, and now we are of the age where were more likely to have disposable income to just be like, hey, I really like these games. I want them to run on current gen hardware and look better. So yeah, here's $60. Like, that's not really a big deal as long as you're in the United States, of course.
Yeah, well, that's of course the big thing. Where a lot of other countries have a big issues with the prices of games, and I understand that. Yeah, I recently I was trying to replay the old Dark Forces games, the like Jedi Knight stuff, and those do not run on any. There's so much you have to do to get it even remotely playable, and I'm just thinking like, because I'm initially like, well, okay, remasters might be a little waste of time, but I'm going back in these and I'm like, I just want to play these games again. I would pay so much for like a KOTOR remaster or anything like that that just irons out the quirks, makes it look a little better.
Yeah.
But most importantly, just makes it stable on a modern platform. And it's because largely we focus Blizzard. Blizzard games generally will run on modern platforms fine, even the oldest ones. But when it comes to a lot of other games, it's a crapshoot whether you can actually get it or not.
Yep.
So I'm all for it. Mass Effect. Mass Effect, on the other hand, there's enough versions I think that'll run. Like, you can run Mass Effect 1 fine. I haven't noticed any issues. But still, I mean, it'd be nice to iron out the jank.
I know that, like, in Mass Effect 2, there's, like, a crash that consistently happens during Kasumi's loyalty quest. That's something that, like, I had to find some crazy workaround. Some of the DLC was likely to crash. So, yeah, just getting all that so that it's just, like, not a problem. And, again, it's more that, like, they're advertising exactly what you're going to get, which I appreciate, and like it's not going to be any like, oh, will there be this in it? Will there be that in it? And those like this and that's are not like game critical things.
Well, there won't be Pinnacle Station.
Right. So that's the one thing. Yeah. So when they were releasing the original Mass Effect for PlayStation 3, I think apparently something happened where the Pinnacle Station base code was like corrupted and irrecoverable. So Pinnacle Station is just like erased from ever being released again, apparently.
Oh, yep. And I had mentioned this last week, and get used that phrase, by the way, because I'm definitely going to say it a lot.
Yep.
Or last time we talked. This happened with Heroes of Might and Magic 3, where they wanted to remaster it, and all of their expansions were lost. All the source code's gone. And for those who don't know programming, like, you can't play as wild, and reversing that is obnoxiously hard. So having the source code's invaluable if you want to do something like a remaster. In fact, it's literally essential. Like,
yeah.
It's that all that was gone, and thus it was kind of a weak remaster because the expansions kind of made it. So this is perfectly believable what happened with Pinnacle Station. Just a random crapshoot. Like, the source code's gone. I mean. It's not Lair of the Shadow Broker, so it's not like an important DLC. I don't think anyone's crying for it, other than...
Exactly. All of Mass Effect 2's DLC were bangers, I think. And if like this happened to Lair of the Shadow Broker, I'd be like, well, you better fucking remake it, because that was like the pinnacle of DLC for that game, and I would say the whole trilogy. Whereas like Pinnacle Station was clearly the weakest. It was not story... anything. I was going to say critical, but like it wasn't related to the story at all, and it was just a bunch of like combat simulations, and the combat in one, in my personal opinion, was not that great. So the idea that they might, well, number one, like I don't care about Pinnacle Station, so moving on from there, the only thing with like the idea of a combat is like if they're trying to inch, not like totally overhaul, but inch Mass Effect 1's combat just a little bit towards 2, then like to me, even though I'm not 100% clear what that's going to be, I know that I'll be okay with it. So that's why I'm also comfortable pre-ordering it.
Yeah. No, that's the big thing. And so with the pre-order for Mass, it's if you think you're gonna get it and the bonuses are good for you, like feel free. Like if you're really skeptical, like I know a lot of people like, oh, it promotes bad consumer practices and all that, but at this point, also most places allow you a pretty steep refund policy because now there's a lot of laws in place about that. So, like, if you don't like it, you can always refund it. But I don't know. We had a brief tangent on pre-orders, but the bonuses look fine on this one. The only thing I'm not big on is the collector's edition. I think this is weaker than I expect with a lot of them anymore. But Mass Effect 3's was fantastic. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't actually looked at what the pre-order bonuses are, so I mean, and one thing that we had touched on again last time when we talked about this initially is like the thing with pre-order bonuses is like this is a very straightforward. It's one of the oldest marketing techniques in the book. You add exclusivity and a time factor, and you make people feel anxious about like, well, this is something I want. I love this franchise, and if I can't get this, then I can never get it again. And the thing is, like, I am not 100% like anti-pre-order. I just think like as long as you are aware of marketing tactics and how they're being used against you, so long as you are aware of them, that kind of precedes your control of the financial situation. Like if you know that you can afford to pre-order, then in a way it doesn't really matter that much. But so long as you know that like you're getting something that you can actually find value in, and you realize that like you don't think you're being tricked into it per se. Like you are getting something that you actually want, and you're not just kind of being tricked into like an exclusivity urgency type thing, then like I think pre-ordering is fine. Again, it all comes down to everyone's individual purchasing power.
Yes, exactly. It just depends. Like I'll definitely always pre-order a StarCraft game because I know that's something I like. Even if it's somehow the worst thing in the world, I'll get value out of it, in my opinion. It just from talking with people, all that. And if you feel that way with Mass Effect, like if you want to figure out for yourself, then go for it. Obviously, the smarter thing is like if you're looking for a value is to wait. But I mean, if you have that income, really like, and I don't want to judge everyone because this is mostly based on U.S. income. I know a lot of people in other countries, it becomes harder. But if you have the income, it's fine to go out and just grab it, like and see for yourself.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, that's why like I don't have a hard and fast rule of like never pre-order anything ever, but you know, it really just depends on the game and the publisher. Like I think EA, especially with like the CNC remaster, has had a pretty good track record so far of ensuring that like when they're doing these remasters, like every remaster is like by definition kind of a cash grab, but like it seems like they're doing it in earnest. You know, like they know it's a good money making opportunity. But, you know, what a world we live in where we can say, like, I think EA is doing a good job as a publisher.
Yeah, shocker.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in the end, video games are there to make money. That is their goal.
Yeah, it's a huge industry.
It's whether it's the, like, there's nothing wrong with them trying to make money, provided they're providing value with it. Like, that's just always the big issue.
Yep.
Whether or not, yeah.
Well, that's why I keep saying, like, I sort of resent feeling like I feel, like, pressured into doing something, and there's a fine line to walk there where, like, of course it's always a marketing tactic, but, like, if I didn't have very much money and I had to choose, like, do I want this game or that game, then, yeah, I'd be a lot more judicious on how I make those decisions.
The one thing that does annoy me with pre-orders, and I just, especially as a collector in my bones, is when it's like, well, the pre-order bonus you get will vary depending on the store you get it from, and I get why they do that, but I just despise that with every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
Where it's not only forced exclusivity. You're just not going to get everything. It's just how it goes.
Agreed.
And I get it because like that industry kind of like the brick and mortar store basically needs a boost. Well, then again, it could just be GameStop. But, but no, that's the only thing I will rail against. Of like, I think that does detract from the game. But in a single player game, I've never actually gotten to like get the super powerful rifle in a single player game. It's like you're making if you're playing for the story, maybe, but it's like you're just making the game easier than it's intended to be in a lot of cases.
Exactly. Yep.
Like Fallout New Vegas, which is one of my favorites, had a DLC that was basically make the game easier, which was like I don't really need this.
Yeah, well, like I'll play this at the very end, like, but I don't want like a gun pack that just gives me a bunch of.
At the start. Yeah, but
Mass Effect actually had a lot of those, but
they did. Yeah, did the later ones have that? Because they were pretty stringent on like weapon types. I literally don't remember.
I don't think there was anything like overtly overpowered that wasn't in the base game. It was just a bunch of different variants. I guess like the arc projector, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's getting a little too specific. But regardless, I guess this kind of sort of leads into our next topic, which is number one, BlizzCon Virtual is coming up, and there's this 30th anniversary like bundle of skins and portraits and such for a bunch of different games, right? So Blizzard's kind of in a tough spot now with their fan base. They're clearly have changed a lot as a company. I guess I wanted to hear your thoughts on the bundle, and we could talk about the company itself after.
Yeah. So the bundle. So for those who don't know the BlizzCon like general routine, every year they do a virtual ticket. If you don't go in person, and you can So basically, you get a stream of it, but also with that ticket comes a bunch of goodies from every game, and the goodies have become a very like big item. Like if you're a portrait collector in StarCraft, that's usually what you do, but it's more so WoW gets you mounts, Diablo gets you transmogs, various things like that, and it's become a big thing. And it's this is nothing new, but this year, because it's a virtual BlizzCon, they want to do the stream for free so everyone can see it, but they still wanted to do the ticket or the skins because it's almost expected, and it's also a big moneymaker for them for not too much effort. But so this year they did a $20 tier, a $40 tier, and a $60 tier, and there's a lot of people up in arms about it, which I don't think is entirely fair. I do think this is only really a value if you play a lot of Blizzard games. So if you play like Overwatch, Hearthstone, StarCraft, and well, okay, the StarCraft bonuses really aren't that great, and WoW, it's probably like you're going to get a lot of like benefit out of it, especially at like the $40 tier, if that's worth it to you. But for people who are like, well, it's a $40 Overwatch skin, it's like, yeah, I guess, but I mean, don't buy it for just one skin. So if it's like, it's very clearly being sold as a bundle, like that. I get it because it's a very nice skin and there's the temptation. They're definitely trying to tempt people. Like, well, if you only want the one thing, it's like you were saying, it's an exclusive thing and you're going to miss out. But then again, they usually re-release these anyway. I haven't checked whether it's done the fine print of this one, but I remember last BlizzCon, both the classic. Well, actually, no, they never released the classic skins from last BlizzCon.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to see if that happens because usually they released it at the next BlizzCon as a thing, but who knows. But like the Sombra skin, I know got released from last BlizzCon. That was the Demon Hunter Sombra. So like in this case, it's more assuming it's the same thing, more pay to get it early, and then you unlock it later. But I don't know. I don't have a problem with the system. Like I got the top tier largely because it comes with 30 days of WoW, and it's $15 I was going to spend anyway. So it ended up it ended up being $50. Yeah, in my calculations, it ended up being less than I would have paid. So I just got that. But yeah, I don't think this is a maniacal cash grab. This is the $60 was basically what you paid before. I'm pretty sure it's either 50 or 60. And it might be, but it's no different than what they had done before on this. The only difference is the stream itself is free, but being like it. This is taking away a facade. No one really paid for the. I'm sure some people did. I don't want to say no one paid for the stream, but a lot of people didn't pay for the stream. They paid for the goodies, and this is just basically taking away that and arguably adding more. So hey.
Yep, that's pretty much my exact thoughts on it as well. You know, I don't want to be like super contrarian about everything we talk about, but this is definitely a case where people are complaining, but as usual, it's about like the wrong thing. Like they have, I guess, like the right intention of like, I wish that I could just buy the one thing that I wanted for a reduced price, right? I agree. At the same time, this is the exact same thing as every other BlizzCon virtual ticket, and for some reason people are treating it as if it's like the 30th anniversary loot bundle, and it's not related to BlizzCon at all, and to be fair, Blizzard hasn't really marketed as such.
Yeah.
So I guess I can understand people making that mistake. But if you're complaining and saying like, oh, it's this stupid 30th anniversary thing, this is just a cash grab, like, well then yeah, every BlizzCon virtual ticket has been a cash grab because it's been the exact same thing. So it's not about, again, being wrong per se, but it's more about like, don't be inconsistent if you're going to complain about this stuff.
And to stress, I have nothing if you have something against the BlizzCon system, because frankly, it is a little bull.
Oh yeah.
As a portrait collector, like you basically, if you want to collect everything, you just get punished for not being around at a certain time. Like I am missing one portrait from my collection that's not like the 1v1. But basically, because I didn't tune into a Korean stream one time, it's gone forever. So I absolutely hate exclusivity stuff.
I remember when they did that. Yeah, I missed a couple of those too.
Yeah. Well, the better one is the banners, where you literally couldn't get all 4 of them watching the stream, and they said we'll release it at a later date. And yeah, that's not happening now.
Yep, I remember that too. I had the hours watched, but I never got it unlocked. That system did not work super well when they were working with it. And the way I described it when we talked yesterday was, a part of the selling element also is they get you to buy the bundle for like even just one of the games. And the idea is you think, well, you know, like, okay, I want the StarCraft portraits, and all I play is StarCraft, and I'm paying $20 for that. Oh, but it comes with all this other stuff. So at the very least, like, I don't play these games right now, but, like, maybe I will. So, like, and then I get all this other stuff. Is not the way you should think about it. The way I believe that it should be approached is the StarCraft portraits are $20, period. Because, like, you're not using those other things. I mean, using is a, you know, you don't have any, you're not assigning any value to those other things. So don't, like, kid yourself into thinking that, like, you will or you should, right? And that's also kind of meant to incentivize you to play their other games, too. So it all, I mean, like, it all makes sense. It all makes, like, perfect logical marketing sense.
Yeah. One thing kind of funny I noticed since yesterday, which it's kind of sad, but also tangents into what we're eventually going to talk about, is I noticed all the StarCraft portraits were games under the Classic team before they just dissolved. It's because it includes everything except Overwatch, so it's Warcraft, Reforged, StarCraft, Here's the Storm, Blackthorn, Lost Vikings, and Rock and Roll Racing, which are all under their umbrella. So, little sad note that I think was intended to be a celebration and now is no longer. Oh well.
Yeah, well, you know, the most notable, you know, recent release that is not included in this at all is Warcraft 3 Reforged.
Yeah, that's another thing. And I get it, they're distancing themselves from it. I don't like it because I was even watching, just today I was watching Grubby's, like, little, because it's the year anniversary of their release. And there's still a big Warcraft 3 community, both in esports and players. And as you know, the custom community, I mean, I'm sure is still around. People watch your Warcraft 3 videos. Like, people still love that game. So why not just, like, and I don't know, I genuinely don't know how hard it is, but, like, couldn't you just added the portraits from StarCraft 2 into that? Like, would that have been hard? It feels like kind of like, we don't want to talk about this anymore.
You know, you actually opened my eyes to this, because I didn't. I'm going to go on the same rant I did yesterday, but you opened my eyes to this with the idea of it being a strategy, not so much that, like, they can't do it, but that they purposefully don't want to acknowledge it. It's, like, too soon, because they realize how big of a flop and how big of a problem they caused.
Yeah, and I get it, because I'm fully expecting this year we're going to get a lot on Diablo Immortal because it's come out. But last BlizzCon, they had nothing. It was tucked in a corner of the con. I had to hunt to find the booth for it. So they were really hoping to blow. I think, like, this thing to, like, the last.
Yo, hang on, I'm losing you for a second. Can you repeat what you just said? Can you hear me? Okay, hang on. We're going to put the recording on pause for a moment.
Okay.
Man, so the forces of the universe really are just determined to not allow us to have this conversation this week, I guess.
Yeah, no, so we're having Discord problems now, so hooray.
So you were just talking about Diablo Immortal and how... So I had said it seems like they want to kind of purposefully keep Warcraft 3 Reforged out of the spotlight. The difference with that and Diablo Immortal, though, is that Warcraft 3 Reforged is already released and people spent/wasted money on it. And also, you can't revert to an old version because they thought it would be a great idea to just make this like a big patch as opposed to just a different game, which is also kind of what I see as a problem. Like, or at least, like, StarCraft Remastered did it similarly, but they have a version, the free-to-play version, sort of frozen in time as well, that is available separately.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to see too much aside from small fixes on that, whereas with Warcraft Reforged, there was the expectation of a regular balance patch because the pro community was kind of calling for that.
Right.
And that's also the bigger shame, is Blizzard's kind of offloaded most of their esports that aren't Overwatch. I don't know about Hearthstone, but I think it's just Overwatch and WoW that have esports that are, like, directly under Blizzard right now. So they don't particularly care, like, they're particularly deep in that community, so they can kind of afford to give it a cold shoulder. But I think it's still a shame. That community is very passionate, and I have a lot of respect for what they make. So. Yep.
Well, if I can give a quick hot take before we talk about the classic teams, because I had a big rant to talk about with that I will repeat from yesterday. But my hot take before that is Diablo Immortal. It was very tone deaf of them to announce it when they did and how they did. But at the same time, I feel like the Diablo IP fits perfectly for mobile. There's nothing about it that's so complex that it can't be on mobile.
Yeah, no, and I got to yeah, as I mentioned, I got to play it like BlizzCon 2018, and it was fine. Like genuinely, it was fine. The gameplay was simplified. Like Diablo's not a complex game. It's already a few buttons. Like it worked fine. Like I'm not a Diablo fan. That's just the one Blizzard IP I never got into. But I played a bit of 2 and 3, and it felt like it. I mean, it felt like exactly what you think. The one valid complaint that and we don't know yet, but I personally don't trust Blizzard or NetEase in the mobile sphere, is the monetization, whether they're going to do basically a whale hunt like they kind of do with Hearthstone. And I get that complaint, and I really hope people keep the pressure on of like, you better not do this too egregiously, because you got to monetize a little bit, but I mean, just don't make it like the core of the game. So I definitely get that. We'll see though. Like, I feel, yeah, we'll see. I don't want to judge it too hard till it comes out, but like you mentioned, it was a bit tone deaf, and it's a bit of a shame now that the announcement basically forced them to announce Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 probably a little too early, because now it's come out that it's not going to come out this year, which for Diablo 4, that's fine. I mean, people can wait. You'd rather wait till it's done, but Overwatch is an esports scene that kind of relies on community interest. So having like, we're going to have the better version come out eventually kind of kills a lot of people's interest to keep like continually watching and playing. So that's the one tiny shame with this debacle.
Agreed. And that was in an earnings call earlier this week where, they had basically said that those releases won't be until 2021. So BlizzCon's been in some strange cycles that went back to when Warcraft 3 Reforged was announced, where it's like they really are pushing release announcements, even though older BlizzCons didn't have that many release announcements and still were like big hits and weren't problems. But now it's like we got to have release announcements, which just is causing many, many problems over time.
Yeah, and it's partially the shift in culture that we've talked about a few times, where Activision, like the one confirmed thing we know is Activision intrusion is basically trying to increase like the Blizzard side of release. Before they were pretty okay with the when it's done mentality, but now that they basically require continued growth, and the Blizzard side needs to produce more because there's like constant years where they're not making much, which was at first kind of why they shifted to a lot of remasters, because it put a product out every year. But now they're really trying to push the big releases.
Right.
But I had a tangent. I had a point with this. So now we're seeing that with Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2, where they really want to get them out. But thankfully, I'm actually like really glad they're not pushing it out for this year, because I mean, we saw what happened with Cyberpunk. We saw what happened with Warcraft Reforged. It's good to give them time, and I can definitely see they want to like throw more people and money at it to make it go quicker. But I mean, anyone who has a degree in like tech or business knows that you just can't throw people at a problem to make it go quicker.
Right.
Because usually train them up and all that.
That's how they're treated. Yeah. So this is where I was going to kind of give my spiel. I wish, again, I'm so mad that I don't have this from yesterday, because I thought that a lot of the points we both made were articulated really well, and I don't think I'm going to be able to recapture mine at least.
Yeah.
So I worked in like corporate machine America for the most of my 20s, so in the technology sphere. So I think I have a lot of insight into this that I can provide. I can't be 100% sure that this is or is not the case at Actiblizzard, but again, I have I'm coming from but take it with a grain of salt regardless. So the idea of the classic team, I think when that announcement came out, most people think that Warcraft 3 Reforged flopped because of bad management decisions. I agree with that. And then the classic team was blamed, and then Blizzard/Activision came in and said, this is all your fault, you're all fired. So like big bad corporation came in and said, how dare you all. Now I will give you the reality, I think, of what happened, is that team probably had huge headcount attrition throughout all of 2020, to the point where there were only like a third or a quarter of the people on it actually filling the roles, and then Blizzard was like, well, like, everyone's gone, so of course we're just going to shut this team down and replace them with the Crash Bandicoot remaker people.
Yeah, I think it was Tony Hawk, but
yeah, one of the Activision groups, and again, it's not. I don't think it's like it was like a malicious like you stupid developers. We're going to blame you for our shortcomings. Because I feel like that's the impression that I get from a lot of people, like on Discord and on Twitter, like, and a lot of people who have like never worked a day in like an office job in their lives and would have no idea how this works. But like in reality, I don't think any self-respecting technologist would have or should have stayed in that group after the release of Warcraft 3 Reforged and being forced to push it so early. I think that a lot of them left of their own volition, as they should have, and you always got to do what's best for yourself and your career. At a certain point, enough people left that they're like, well, I guess this team is dissolved because there just aren't enough people on it to support any of our products, which explains why there were barely any updates to Warcraft 3 Reforged, why all the StarCraft Remastered updates basically shut down, and why there's no Warcraft 3 Reforged stuff in the 30th bundle.
Yeah, and that's basically, in terms of StarCraft, like we mentioned, a lot of people seem to think that Blizzard shut them down and then everyone formed Frost Giant, when that is definitely, like, we've already had it confirmed that everyone left like gradually, because Tim Morton left a year before that, Monk left a few months before the announcement, even the patch hit. And then after everyone left, they formed Frost Giant, and then it got shut down. I know the announcement came after they announced that StarCraft was shut down. But
right.
You don't make a company in a day, put it that way.
Yeah, so it typically worked backwards compared to, I think, what a lot of people think. A lot of people think these people were fired and then they went and started their own company, whereas, like, no, they left, they planned on starting a company, and then Blizzard was like, this team doesn't exist anymore. Like,
yeah, because it costs a lot to retrain these people, especially when it comes to the StarCraft editor. Especially, like, anyone who's made a map will know that's not a skill set that's like it's very hard to learn the deeper ins and outs of it. And I feel like they had a kind of dream team. They had a lot of very, very good people. Like, I for how small their team was, it's absolutely insane the commanders they pulled off in their last waning years. So
now, to be clear as well, I'm not saying, like, don't blame, Jay Burrito's pro-corporate. Like, no, it's more that I just understand probably what happened, and that also shines a light on, like, these people all left because the company culture wasn't fitting what they wanted, or it wasn't allowing them to grow their careers in ways that they saw as beneficial to them. So, like, yeah, of course they should have left.
The pressures of the pressures of Activision still led to them leaving. It just wasn't a direct thing.
Yeah, they weren't just fired. Yeah.
Yeah, that was because Activision forced them. They needed to release. They really wanted to release the last year to put on their earnings, but they had to release that when they could release, even though it wasn't done, because a lot of resources got taken to push for a Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2, and it also goes to a common complaint if you look at Glassdoor and a lot of other. Or talk to like exit interviews for Blizzard people, is that one of the big things is the
Nope, I think we're losing each other again. Hang on.
All right, let me know when.
We're gonna get through this together. All right.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, so you were just speaking. Do you recall? You want to kind of pick up where you were?
Where was I? I swear this broadcast is cursed. We were
talking about basically how the people had left prior to, like, they weren't fired per se. They left because of the culture and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I was stressing that this is still, like, you can still pin this on a lot of the executive. I say Activision, but it's really like a lot of the executive board in general. Because as far as the top level goes, there is no Blizzard. It's Activision division. It's Activision Blizzard. Like, the division that Morhaime kind of set up isn't there anymore. It's just a big mass. But so yeah, I'm not sure it came through or not, but they were forced, like, they wanted to release in that year. I think it was 2018. They weren't done. They got some time to push out, but eventually they're like, no, you got to release it, and they released a really bad product because of that. And also a lot of their resources got taken to push Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 because they want to get those out. And that, yeah. So definitely, like, most of the exit reviews will always say with Blizzard employees, like, there's a lot of executive meddling. They'll just swoop in and make sweeping changes. So, like, just like Jay Breen was saying, don't think that we're saying, oh, it's not Activision's fault at all. It's not like the big executive came in and said, you're all fired. We're burning this team to the ground. And it could be that. We don't know for sure, but all evidence points to that not being the case, because it wouldn't make any sense to do that. The amount that they're spending is so minimal compared to, like, the budgets of the main games. Like, it doesn't cost that much to keep StarCraft running, basically. Right. And another thing I did want to poke at, because people think there's no one on these games now, is that there's still, just because the Umbrella's dissolved, there still seems to be people on these titles. Like, I follow a number on Twitter. Like, there's still artists for Heroes of the Storm. I'm pretty sure it's still going to get releases just at its slower rate. There's still devs who are assigned to StarCraft 2. I don't know if that's their only thing, but they recently fixed the API bug. So there's someone there that's on the forums tagged as a StarCraft dev that they can use or bring in when they need to fix something and keep it maintained, basically. So it's not like we're never going to see anything ever again. I don't think we're going to see much, certainly. I think it's just going to be enough to keep the lights on. It's become a debate whether either we're going to see the new, like, a big thing they promised was the maps are going to rotate every season, and people are confused because the WSL season's a little weird this year, whether we're actually going to see those maps rotate or not. So we'll see, and I think March. So
yeah.
So.
Well, that kind of brings me to the next point I was going to talk about. Not the maps, but like people still working on the games. I think there's still developer support for every game. I think the difference is there's probably not like a product owner for StarCraft 2 or like a director, like a game director like Tim Morton was, for example. So like to say like Heroes of the Storm, I think is probably still has like a product owner because the game's, I think, like you said, there's still like art designers. I don't think there's like an art designer for StarCraft 2 or for Warcraft 3 for that matter. But I can't be sure about that one. But I don't know. For Warcraft 3, I get the impression that only a select few people understood what the heck was going on with that game engine. And then when it only takes like one or two very knowledgeable, experienced people to leave to just throw any of this stuff into complete disarray. You can't, like you said earlier, you can't just like throw new people at a problem and they're just going to fix it in a day.
Yeah, especially when it comes to these new engines. And a lot of people, I'm sure, have experience with the editor and all that. And there's some very experienced people. But when you lose a lot of the star people, it can be, especially with like high turnover, they might want a lot of money because it's a specialized skill set. It becomes hard to get people who will fill that role. You can only have so many, but especially if you're in the middle of a project for something new. In this case, it's an old thing, but it becomes hard to onboard people.
Yep. So the bigger problem too with like corporate technology groups is what we're seeing here, which is I think that non-technologists, or at least technologist management, tends to think that they treat their devs like workhorses as if they are like computers themselves. Like, you need a certain amount of computing power to do a certain task. That's how they treat developers. They just say, well, if we hire enough developers to do this, then it will get done. And I guess at a certain level that's true, notably like a lower level, like queue-based work, but like that's not the case. Like you have to treat these people like valuable employees, and this just goes to show that if they leave, you basically just have one or two products that immediately go end of life because you don't have anybody with the experience or the knowledge to continue supporting them. You can't just throw, again, what they consider just resources, namely people, developers, right, at the problem. And this is a problem that I've seen in my personal experience. It's not just in game development, but I do think that game development has become one of the worst, most egregious offenders of it.
Game development is definitely exasperated at it, especially because they can afford to pay them less. Because especially like the big companies, where it's like, oh, I want to work on a Blizzard product. Like, who doesn't want to have on their resume like I worked on WoW, one of the biggest games ever, or not even resume, but just like have that as a thing. So, and they kind of know that, so like the rates are less than if you took a more mundane job, like doing, just something more boring, but probably more profitable for like the banks or whatever. But if they kind of know that, there's a lot. I've noticed a pretty high turnover rate when it comes to a lot of Blizzard employees. A lot leaving, a lot coming on. Like you mentioned, it's just devs are often treated as workhorses, and that's not to say like if you work in video games, it's just a hellhole every day of your life. Like, I mean, I'm sure crunch is always a problem. I haven't noticed it too much at Blizzard. Like too many major.
I haven't heard about it, as much compared of a problem there,
It exists and I brought this up yesterday. Like, honestly, most of the crunch stories come from its early years, where people are super proud of like, I developed StarCraft and I missed the birth of my son to do it. It's like that hasn't aged particularly well within the age of crunch. But Yeah, not as bad as other companies. Like, there's no CD Projekt Red, EA. I don't know if you remember that old EA parent thing from, or EA wife thing from years ago. Though they've really tried to clean up their act because of that perception of them.
Yeah. Well, they
Yeah,
just quietly keep putting out a new FIFA every year for the majority of their income and just totally gouge those people. And then
Yep.
the rest of their games seem like they have pretty good faith development going on.
Oh yeah. Well, they lost the exclusivity on the Star Wars license, but that's a different.
Right.
Yeah. So we're seeing more laws as we get a push to unionization for a lot of game companies, which is going to be an interesting thing to watch, and I think that's a good topic for a future day if something happens with it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so I come from. I don't know how I could say, like, it's not like I'm coming from a certain perspective. I guess my perspective is I don't think there's any franchise that I love so much that I could ever think to justify crunch.
Yeah.
I think it all comes down to, like, are you a darling to the gaming community like CDPR? Okay, well then most of them will just let you off the hook because they want the game.
Yeah.
I love StarCraft. I know you do too. Exceptionally, of course. But like, I just couldn't imagine thinking that it would ever be okay to expect someone to go in and work, 12-hour days, Sunday to Saturday. That's just gross to me. But comparing that to like the previous example, where like, yeah, you don't want to miss the birth of your kid. But in the past, the way that crunch was viewed was because people had a much more personalized hand in what they were making. People wore a lot more different hats, jacks of all trades, if you will. And like the original Brood War development was under a completely different company structure than it is now, where again, they're just throwing developers at a problem. Whereas back then, people took a lot more pride in their work because they had a much bigger hand in the entire process.
And so I do think it's an issue because I don't think you should say you can't work extra hours to get this product out. And I definitely get if your heart and soul's into it and you want to do it and you need the extra money or you just want this to succeed. I get it. It's the issue of it becomes kind of a slope of like, well, they're doing it. Why aren't you? Like, why aren't you putting in the same amount of effort? Why do we need you?
Yeah, it's a toxic office culture. Yeah.
Yeah, I genuinely think most crunch starts like that, where it's like, well, a few people really want to get this product out. I'm willing to like give up my paycheck, all that, to just make sure it works, get my job done. And then there's a lot of people who have lives outside of it who are probably very good, but they're like, well, why aren't you putting this in? It's not like, I'm sure some of it's become intentional, but that's just kind of how it starts. Like it's a steady move towards that, especially when there's unrealistic demands. We got to get out by this quarter so we can make our money back.
Yep. Again, it's I think this kind of stuff has always existed, but like, and I hate to do like the good old days fallacy, but yeah, you just kind of look at like what we used to kind of see as labors of love, or at least that's how it seemed, and a lot of the people that made those games just still seem very proud of them. And so, like, if I see, Frost Giant being like, hey, we spent all Saturday working on this thing, like, in a way, it's because they just, like, genuinely want to do it, and they find reward in doing it. But again, if it's all ties together. Like, if you're a developer and you feel like you've just been reassigned from StarCraft to Hearthstone to Heroes of the Storm to Overwatch 2, like, you're never, like, you feel like you're just a tool as opposed to, like, a valued person in this company who like has something to contribute to a project as a whole. So like, of course you're going to value going home at 5:00 rather than staying until 8.
Yeah, and I think that's another big thing is a lot of, especially when there's a bigger hand in it. When you have a bigger hand, usually, and this isn't always the case, you'll see better returns or a bigger cut of the pie when the game comes out. Whereas with these corporate monoliths, these are crunch gets expected. And you still get paid like a kind of crappy fee, basically, for your small role in this project because everyone's doing it. So it's your example of Frost Giant's a pretty good one in that regard. And I hope they don't crunch. Like I genuinely hope they are managed to keep it healthy, I do think games suffer under crunch, even though there can be a need for it, but it's ideally, we would avoid it at all. Like the games industries have become big enough to where we can afford not to.
Yeah.
Most other industries avoid it. That's yeah.
Well, yeah, and again, I think it's a fine line to tread, and a lot of it comes down to the culture at your office, where like you shouldn't feel obligated to stay late, but if you genuinely feel like a reward in life to work on this, then like that's like the dream job. Like you love what you're doing, but like if you feel pressured into doing it, then yeah, you should be able to just go home, and that's not fair because you're not technically paid for that. But I don't know. This is a totally different topic. But I hope that I kind of articulated again the difference in culture where like you might feel obligated to stay and like work hard on something, and not technically get paid for the extra time versus like wanting to do it.
Yeah, no, and I definitely, I definitely see the point. Thankfully, again, it doesn't seem the bigger problem seems to just be like significantly lower pay at Blizzard versus your major crunch time. So take one bad thing, try to substitute another. But...
Yeah, well, that's the other thing in technology is pay is very competitive. A lot more than many other industries. So like if you want top talent, you've got to pay for it. And I guess this has kind of turned into like the banality of corporatism, especially around like video game development. So I guess, we can kind of wrap it up around that. But yeah, it kind of all started with the whole classic team Dissolution and how I wanted to explain how I imagine it's a lot more mundane than people think it was.
It usually is. It's. I mean, there's always some numbers reason for it, but it's usually not a malicious one. Now, I'm sure there's definitely been some malicious stuff that's happened in the past, don't get me wrong, but I don't think this one is. There's no evidence that it is, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely like incompetence at a management level in that they expected they could set a release date for a game earlier than developers supposedly wanted it to be. And or maybe the lead developers just did a really bad job estimating their time. That's something we'll never know. But there were clearly big mistakes made around that level of management, and this is what it led to. Inevitably, you have a bad release, you're going to lose people. They're going to go somewhere else, especially if you're not paying them very much, and you lay on like really high expectations where it's not very fair. They're getting death threats from crazy, stupid players. It's just ugh.
Something. And that's another issue is like we brought up like Twitter, the fact you can talk to the devs and they want to come out and they're almost all of them are very passionate about what they do. But then someone's like, you're the worst, you deserve to die because you nerfed this, or this thing wasn't to my standards. Like, it's a little, people get a little crazy. Don't be like that. As for Reforged, we actually do have a time, and we don't know this for sure, but it's generally the impression we got is the estimates were initially made when they had a lot more resources, and then those resources got allocated elsewhere to help accelerate other development, but the estimates didn't change.
Yep.
So
it's because the pre-orders already went out, and
yep. So what do? You can't. Yeah, people want their product, and I do remember at the time most people were like, "Well, where is it? I want it now." And you saw it with Cyberpunk. You saw it with a lot. That's also why I'm like, please don't try to like ask like where's Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 too much. It's just let it, please. I want this to be good.
Yeah, I mean, you can still kind of blame the publishers in that they hyped things up so early that of course people are gonna ask like, where is it? You announced this a year ago.
No, definitely, yeah. I've been very vocal. That was announcing it when they did was a huge mistake, and it was kind of funny. Jeff Kaplan, like, before he showed the trailer, was very much, hey, this is a long way out. It was super clear he was like, didn't think this was ready. Mm-hmm. And from what I had played, it was very unpolished. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even compared to Diablo 4, which I've heard was less along, but I thought was much more like polished and felt like a full game. Like, I don't know. So.
Me too. Yeah, it feels like they've put out a good chunk of stuff for Diablo 4. That it looks like it's closer to being done than it actually is.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot more because it's a I don't want to call Overwatch 2 an expansion, but it's there's less of a full everything from the ground up there than Diablo 4. Mm-hmm. So I'm just sad because they canceled my one StarCraft shooter for Overwatch 2, so I'm going to be biased against it forever.
Hey, I saw something in the lore server about like a leaked mobile alpha for StarCraft. Is this the one that was also canceled? Or is this just completely fake?
It's not fake. This comes up a few times, but this time it's Chinese, so they can't actually C&D it. Basically, it's just people are trying to make a fan mobile port to StarCraft 1. And there's been some pretty crazy over the years. Like, I remember they cease and desisted basically in a Flash alpha version of Brood War, and it was a little more simplistic, but it worked. I mean, very choppy, but it did work. But that got cease and desisted. From what I gathered, yeah, there's just someone who managed to port Brood War to Android on mobile in China. So yeah, I don't think that's an indication that they're working on it. I think it was just a fan project. I admit I haven't heard too many news press or news releases on it, but we'll see. I don't think I don't expect that would have been their big release. I think they would have tried something new, but to get on that Clash of Clans money, because mobile mobile strategy. I mean, mobile strategy is a thing, and they've admitted they want to move to mobile. And with the amount it makes, like the figures for Call of Duty mobile were insane. Like that just basically propped up Activision. So I don't like it, but I don't blame them. It's making them a ton of money.
Yeah, mobile, I mean, it's kind of what we had talked about earlier. It leads to an uncomfortable level of monetization, and part of that is because of the business practices, where for some reason, certain business practices are considered more acceptable on mobile that they wouldn't try with their typical consumer base on PC or console, I think. But that's also because there are many more free-to-play models, and also because you're accessing a much larger audience via mobile at this point.
Definitely, and there's no upper limit with a lot of these purchases.
Right.
And there's some pretty shady, a lot, and psychology factors into a lot of things. But there's some good talks on basically the psychology of mobile and purchases. Just so many tiny things they do to just encourage you to buy a little more, that kind of stuff. And it's icky when you see it. I definitely get it, but I have to like it.
I think this could be a really good topic for the future as well. Just kind of like the general reward system that goes into certain games, and which ones do we think are I mean, it's all psychology in a way, but which ones do we think are really are more rewarding versus more artificial? I think it would be a cool topic.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And with the kind of rumor mill being that there's going to be a mobile game announced, it may be a good time to do it. This BlizzCon. Yeah. It's not confirmed, mind you, but and being fair, there's been several over the years that we've known have been in development. They were going to try to cash in on the Pokemon Go thing with a Warcraft IP, but we don't know what happened to that. But we'll see. I'm sure something will be announced. There's been so many mobile job postings, so yeah.
Yeah, BlizzCon will be a good topic for next time.
Yeah, I fully expect that's going to be what we talk about. So yeah, it'll be exciting.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, we're at about an hour. I think we hit a lot of the stuff we wanted to talk about. Hopefully, again, maybe we shed some light on things that you didn't know. Maybe we said some things you disagree with. We'd like to hear from you.
You all better like this video for how much effort we put into put this out.
We recorded it twice, and then Discord booted us off 2 times now. So yeah, it's been something.
Yeah, it's been something. So, all right. Well, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to see y'all feedback on it, and looking forward to see what gets announced at BlizzCon, which I expect will be the next time I talk to you all. Yeah.
Oh God! Wait, have I been muted this whole time again?
Oh God, I'm leaving.
No, we're all good.
This is a canceled series.
Well, thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
See ya.